what I'm going to be doing today is giving some really informal updates on projects that are either ongoing or initiatives that are upcoming in 2023 for the PMSF. And I have my tea here, and so this is just going to be an informal chat with you all, and I hope to engage you as much as possible and maybe ask you some questions about where you think we should be headed. And then I will also take questions from you, and I hope to get through as many of those as possible. And some of the initiatives I'm going to talk about, I just want to say, would not be possible without the generous support of our donors. The number of things that we're able to do and the speed at which we're able to do them just would not be possible without you, and we are so, so thankful for you. In that context, today is Giving Tuesday, and I've just heard from Shira that we reached $30,000 in donations at 3:30 p.m., which is absolutely unbelievable. I think our goal is to reach 35,000 by 7 p.m. So thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our incredibly generous donors. Okay, so some of the initiatives I'm going to talk about today really fall into two categories. One is really helping in the here and now, in the short term, to help with management of symptoms and support in the science and medicine area. And the other half that we're really focused on, of course, is building a future strategically of more trials, more drugs, more treatments, everything that can help us have a better life in the future. So that's really our focus in science and medicine. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining. I'm sure people will come on and trickle in and out, and I'm happy to see you. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be providing some updates on our current initiatives and also some of our future initiatives in 2023. And the first one that I would love to start with is the Young Investigator Award that's focused on neuropsychiatric illness and regression. So a little bit of background for anybody that's not familiar with this. This was an initiative that we started last year to offer funding to a clinical researcher to delve specifically into these symptoms in PMS. This has been funded starting in July of this year of 2022 and goes until July of 2023. And the thing that's really special about this award is that we're actually funding 50% of this person's time to focus very specifically on this project. So while we have excellent, expert medical advisors, a lot of them have full-time positions and can't devote all of their attention to PMS. And so us being able to fund these awards helps us to ensure that a really significant portion of a researcher's time is devoted to PMS. So how this worked was at PMSF, we put together applications, a request for applications, and a review committee of our scientific advisors. And we actually landed on a candidate named Dr. Asif Rahman, who is a psychiatrist and is working under Dr. Alex Kalevzon at Mount Sinai, who many of you know. And I've had a chance to keep in contact with Dr. Rahman since he has started in July, and he gave me a peek at what he's doing now, and that's what I'd love to share with you. So his project is currently two parts. The first one is that he's reviewing a lot of case studies from the Neuropsychiatric Consult Group. And for those who are not familiar with that, it is a group of expert clinicians and researchers who have a lot of experience in neuropsychiatric illness in general and regression, and specifically in PMS. And they essentially host physicians from around the world in a virtual format and give them very specific advice medically in a provider-to-provider format for people with PMS who have neuropsychiatric illness or regression. So it's a way for them to give really tangible, meaningful advice, and this relates to medications and supports, and they consider the whole case of the person. So he is analyzing a lot of those case reports right now, and I think he's doing about 30 at a time. And he is looking at things like age of onset, genetics, types of symptoms, profile, triggers, medications. And this will be important not only to, publish for the medical and clinical community and to understand better exactly when and how these things happen, but it's also important for us as a community and for PMSF because we'll be able to give you more information about when and how to look out for these things. And it's really kind of pulling themes of what you need to be aware of. And that's one of the number one things that we hear from families is that they'd love to know that. So a second part of his project that he's currently, and I should say that the first part he's almost done analyzing and should be publishing soon. And we'll be comparing that to any previous publications or summaries of this work. And second, he is working on building surveys, which I think is really exciting to actually go back to the families who have done the neuropsych consult. And so he is going to go back to them, talk with the family members, not only the physicians, and ask about all the additional details that maybe wouldn't be in the data right now. So did the recommendations work? If something else worked, what worked? What did you notice leading up to any of these symptoms? And so a lot of these, preceding factors he hopes to be able to pull out from those interviews. So I'm really excited about that part of the project, and that should also be completed and published within the year. So that's the update on neuropsych. I spent a little bit of time talking about that, but some of them I might take less time. I'm just going to look through the comments and see if there's any questions on this. A lot of highs. Hello, everybody. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Melissa. We have people internationally. That's great. I will just sit here for 30 seconds. If anybody has any questions about the Young Investigator Award in Neuropsychiatric Illness. The other thing that I will mention about this is that we will be offering it again, either to him or to someone else. So we hope that this work is continued until we really have all the answers that we need. Okay, so another project I wanted to give a current update on is our application for a specific ICD code for PMS. So ICD code stands for International Classification of Diseases, and it's essentially a tag or a code that is associated with a syndrome or disorder in the medical system. So it's essentially a label. And currently, PMS does not have its own, and this is true of many rare diseases, so it's kind of lumped in with a ton of other disorders. So in our case, our code is often coded under general deletions of chromosomes, and that can be really difficult because you're unable to track information specifically about Phelan-McDermid in the medical system. So this can be important for things like recognition that Phelan-McDermid is its own disorder at the very start with diagnosis. It can be important for service and insurance coverage, both of those. It can be important for tracking, say, the economic burden of the disorder or how many people have the syndrome. Many things about public health data that are really important for our cause in many ways. And finally, it can attract interest from groups that are really interested in developing drugs for Phelan-McDermid. So pharmaceutical companies, for instance, sometimes as a prerequisite require a code in order to consider a syndrome for their development. So we are very proud to say this process is almost complete. We hired a consultant who is an expert in medical coding, and we did that because we've heard from many people in the rare disease community that it can be very, very difficult to get a code, and we wanted to make sure that we applied correctly. So we worked with this consultant to draft a proposal to the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, Centers of Disease Control, and this was done alongside myself and our medical advisors and requires a lot of medical literature. And we were so happy to hear that that was accepted, and they did not have any changes to our proposal, and we actually got invited to present this clinically to the CDC, and Dr. Curtis Rogers did this, and he did a fantastic job in September. So we are very much hoping that we are on to the next round, and we have had our key opinion leaders send in some letters of support, and we have just heard that we have a letter of support from the American Coders Association, I think is their name. So we're very happy about this. It can take a while. It is a government process, but it seems like we're well on the way, and we hope that it supports you all in many different ways. I will pause here and see if there's any questions about this. Doesn't seem like it. Okay, so another thing I wanted to give a short update on is our family conference. It's actually concluding soon, and we've been doing a year-long virtual themed As We Are Family conference, as many of you know, and we have finished our scientific sessions for the year. This will actually be the last one, this recorded Facebook Live, and will be the year wrap-up. And I'm just so happy that we've been able to have many different topics, all of which having medical experts be our speakers. And so I just wanted to list these off to mention that if anybody wasn't registered for the conference or hasn't seen these things, that all of them will be available as videos to everyone. So this includes PMS genetics. So again, we had a great part about, Ring 22 directly from Katie Phelan there. So I might actually link that in the comments in response to the question too. We had GI disorders, neuropsychiatric illness, medical marijuana for seizures and other symptoms, clinical consensus guidelines for Phelan-McDermid syndrome, which I'm told there will be a new version out very, very soon. After that, we had clinical trials in PMS, what we've learned and what is coming in clinical trials. We had a gene therapy in PMS session with Jaguar gene therapy. We had sleep disorders, nutrition and metabolic supports for the vulnerable brain, and epilepsy in PMS. And finally, the most recent session, which was a couple of weeks ago, was the Meet the Scientific Advisory Committee meeting, where we had folks listen in on a quarterly advisory meeting with 13 of our MDs and PhDs around the world that work in Phelan-McDermid syndrome. So this session will actually be made available very soon in our December newsletter. So please check that out. I think it was a really great session, and we love working with all of our medical and scientific advisors. So all of those sessions will be made available very soon, and they have a lot of really practical information for either treatment or for future decision making. And so we hope that that is helpful. And I would love to hear more from you all for our next conference if there are other scientific and medical topics that you would love covered. Those things start getting planned, even though it's 2024. Far in advance. So please either email me at kate@pmsf.org with ideas you have, or post them in the chat. Lymphedema, yes. So lymphedema was a fantastic session by Dana Winrow, I believe, and I was not directly in charge of that because it was somewhat under family support, I think. So I am sorry for leaving that out, but that was a fantastic session. And hello to everyone saying hello. So nice to see you. Okay, so last, I have maybe two more things, then I'll get into future priorities. So there's two areas where we collect data, rich data sets in Phelan-McDermid syndrome. One of them is our PMS Data Hub, and one of them is the natural history study. And both of these things are just absolutely instrumental to anything that we do in partnership with pharmaceutical companies or in building more research or clinical trials for Phelan-McDermid syndrome. As you can imagine, if there is a drug developer who's interested in Phelan-McDermid syndrome, they want to know things like how many people have it, what types of genetics do they have, what types of medications are they on, because they might conflict with our medication, things like that. So we consider both of these things really powerful tools to be able to interface with the people working in our syndrome, whether it's research at any stage of the process or a very late stage being interested in developing drugs for Phelan-McDermid syndrome. So that both the Phelan-McDermid syndrome data hub and the natural history study, all of the information for enrollment, FAQs, any questions you may have are on our website under the research tab, accelerating research. The natural history study is held throughout the US, and it is just one of the richest sources of data that we have that's been going on for a number of years and has resulted in many publications and really good quality data for what happens in PMS and at what age. So we are so thankful for everyone that has enrolled in either one or both of those. You're helping us build a future of research in PMS. And similarly to that, I wanted to mention the externally led PFDD meeting, which was held November 8th. We were partners with CureShank on this project, and this was really an opportunity to interface directly with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that would approve any drugs for PMS. And so a lot of families told their stories in many different ways, whether they were a speaker or they called in or they wrote in, and all of that is being compiled into a tangible written report called the Voice of the Patient Report, which is going to live forever and be a way that the FDA and drug developers can make decisions about drugs for PMS. So we consider this a huge priority in the drug development area, and we were so touched and thankful to see everybody that came out. We heard that it was one of the most attended sessions ever for an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting. So I will post something in the comments very shortly with information for where to watch that and where to submit comments, because you can still submit comments for this report before December 7th. So feel free to do that at any time. And I'm mental health issues as a focus for the conference. I think that it's something that we will focus on in every conference for the future, and we know this is a big one for families. And Cynthia responded she's going to send a friend request and chat through this, because we do have families that have experience with this, and that's really nice to see. Okay, so I would like to shift gears a little bit, and all of the things I just mentioned are things that are relatively ongoing and will be carried on through 2023, but I wanted to mention a couple of also brand new things. And this will not be everything that we do in 2023, but just things that we're really interested in off the bat. And I really want to reiterate that we're also very interested in hearing from you all. So if you have ideas about areas that you think we could really be more focused on in science and medicine, please either post them in the chat or email me at kate@pmsf.org. So the first new project that we're working on is starting a brand new grants program. So one thing that is often a very high priority and offered by a lot of rare disease groups and foundations is funding for research. And this could be very, very clinical research or really any stage of research. And we already do this to some degree now at the PMSF. For example, our Young Investigator Award is an example of this, but we really want to ramp this up in 2023. And the reason this is so important is that we need all the research we can get from all the investigators we can get from around the world. And it's often difficult for young scientists to, or even any stage of scientists, to get funding for a rare disorder if they don't have a ton of data. So if they're applying to something like the NIH to get funding to do this big research project, it often requires an almost foolproof proposal where they already have a ton of data, and it's not very risky and not very innovative, and they can then do the work. So it's a challenge to get there. We have a lot of experts and people who are focused in PMS, but we want to open the door to more, and we want to continue to fund the things that are making real progress. So we hope that this will open the door for more research partnerships, more innovative information, a lot more clinically meaningful data. So we we would love your input in every step of this process. So number one, we'd love to know what you most want funded. We will be sending around a poll in our December newsletter with some options for you to choose from about what you most want funded, but I will also say them here in case people would like to answer on this thread and we can collect even more information. So I'm going to go off and just list a few categories that we think might be really important in science and medicine. We can't fund them all, but just as a starting point. And if there's some that jump out to you, please just type them in the chat as this is really, really important to me. I need to see this funded. So one theme that we were thinking of are grant applications that are focused across several disorders. There are many disorders that are very similar to PMS in terms of symptomology and are also genetic neurodevelopmental disorders. So this would be a theme of research that's really focused on finding common areas, either in treatment or underlying mechanisms. That could help us gain a lot of information just from other disorders. Another one is applications focused on clinical tests or measures to make them more accessible. So we know that a lot of people, it's difficult to get to these clinical centers and get these tests done, especially when they're really sometimes long. And so we could have applications for grant funding to make these things be at home or passive or hands-off. So that's another category. A third category would be specific symptom-focused research. So this is similar to the Neuropsych Young Investigator Award, where we could focus it in some area, such as epilepsy or GI or communication. And this will be focused on better management. So if you're interested in that, please let us know. A fourth area could be an innovation award. So this would be awarding anything that's a completely novel area in the field of PMS research. This is important because it can open up new doors for research and clinical therapeutics. And I have two more ideas. The fifth one would be adapting clinical tests and measures to be more applicable to people with PMS. Something we hear a lot is that folks go to do these measurements or these tests and they don't feel that they accurately reflect how their child is doing or don't even apply to their child. So this could be awarding, changing some of those dynamics. And a sixth category would be awards for research that are really trying to make the jump from, okay, you have a drug candidate or something like that from the lab, and you're trying to make this translational, you're trying to bring it to clinical trials. That could require a significant amount of funding, and we could have a theme like that. So something I should have mentioned to start is that these themes are really, really helpful so that investigators know what they're really applying for and, upfront what they should be doing. So these are just themes that we're thinking of offering. And I will see if anybody... Okay, thank you. I'm seeing some feedback about especially the first category seems really interesting. Seizures. Oh, wow. Sorry, I missed a lot of comments while I was chatting there. So, hi, Katie. Hi in Michigan. Mitochondrial issues. That's really interesting. Regression. We will continue to fund that. And I see there's a question about how many people are diagnosed, and Ronnie's addressing that, so thank you. Okay, so another way that we really want to engage everyone in this new grants program is to, if you are interested, if you are scientifically inclined, to judge these actual applications. So if you are interested in doing that and we want these applications to actually reflect what you all want the most, please email me at kate@pmsf.org or post in the chat. We would like this review of this grant process to be done by not only myself and our clinical and scientific advisors, but also by you all. So if you want to be part of a small task force, please let me know, and we're happy to include you. Okay, so a second area which might be interesting to some, or hopefully to everyone, but especially interesting to some of the folks on the live who are more newly diagnosed, is that we're really focusing on an area, an initiative about genetics and the first interaction with genetic counselors. PMSF held a conference last year that was focused on experiences of families with genetic counselors and that first initial stage of diagnosis, and then getting all the information that they need. So we did a lot of really interactive patient engagement strategies in that conference and learned a ton. For instance, there was an activity of families writing love letters and breakup letters to their genetic counselors, and those were really, really insightful and amazing to read, because we learn a lot about what families want from genetic counselors at that early stage of being diagnosed. And we learn that many people go a long time without having the information they need, and that they often get those resources or more of those resources once they're connected with the foundation. So we had from that conference several take-homes about what families most want available on our website and from genetic counselors. And so we're writing that up in a publication and starting a little bit of a campaign to be able to actually get that information out there at when you need it, both on our side and on the genetic counseling side. And we really hope that we can help educate some of the major labs, and at least have them link to the resources that you most need very early on. And I will take a second to see if there's any other questions. Jamie would like to be included in the grant review. We would love to have you. Hi from Bulgaria. Fantastic. Okay, so I just have a couple of more things I'd love to talk about. So one thing that is a general area that we're really working on is increasing pharmaceutical interest. And this comes from a lot of different areas. Number one is, not number one, but one of the ways is networking. So I've been attending a lot more conferences and trying to, communicate with a lot of companies that may have the capacity or maybe close to working with a group like ours and starting these conversations. Also building the tools to get drug developers what they need from us in order to be invested in us. So these are things like the Data Hub or being able to connect them with the natural history study. But we also want to build some more tools. One example of that would be to have a document or a resource that we can share not only with industry partners and drug developers, but also with academic researchers, that tells them how to work with us and how to work with our population of people with PMS and their families. Because we are noticing that oftentimes when we're asked to participate in a study, families have similar feedback. They want full transparency very early on about, how many visits, how much time commitment, how much does it cost, is it like all those practical questions. And they also have some pretty standard, frequently asked questions associated with these studies. And so we're realizing that there are such common themes that we really need to build something that we can hand, researchers, scientists, industry professionals, the second they come in contact with us, to teach them this is how you work with us and how we have a really beneficial relationship with you from the start. So this area, we're really building a lot, and we're trying to lower any barriers to development of clinical trials, whether that's helping with development of measures that are more that are useful for measuring how a drug is working, providing tools to these companies. And we have recently had interest from a new pharmaceutical company that we announced in September that has just added Phelan-McDermid syndrome to their pipeline. They are doing an antisense oligonucleotide RNA therapy, and that is a mouthful, and I plan to fully explain that in a webinar coming up. But it's exciting that we're adding more and more of these companies that are adding us to their pipeline and developing drugs for Phelan-McDermid syndrome. So we're really thrilled about that. Another area that is a little bit of a mix between science and family support is we've heard a lot from families that sometimes it can be really challenging in the ER or in urgent care, in the hospital, or in general to always get physicians to take families seriously. If they say something like, I know my child best, I know that, you know, in Phelan-McDermid syndrome, which is a rare syndrome, uh, these X types of drugs don't work, and they're not always taken seriously, and especially in the area of neuropsychiatric illness and regression. We had a special listening session with a few folks who gave us really tangible advice about what to do, and that was one of the areas. And so one of the things that we've been working on, and definitely in partnership with Diane in operations, who's done such a fantastic job, is creating cards with QR codes on them that will be both virtual and physical that you can just scan or hand to your doctor that have a lot of information and a lot of very official information about, say, medical advisors' credentials and what they say about Phelan-McDermid syndrome, so that this part can get a lot easier for you. So we hope that that helps, and we hope that those are out pretty soon. And I will pause for a second before I talk about the last thing. Seems like Melissa would like to take part in reviewing. That's great. Just found out about the diagnosis a few days ago. Welcome. I know it's a lot of information at once. We have a ton of resources on our website for new families if you'd like to check those out. And I would just say take it one step at a time early on. Okay, so I just want to mention a couple of other small things, or I guess they're not small, but just final things. So some of you may be familiar that we orchestrated a NIH-funded conference this past year for GI issues. It was appropriately called CANDID. I know historically families are very candid with each other, talking about poop and GI issues, and so we thought that was an appropriate name. But we brought together stakeholders from many neurodevelopmental disorders, rare epilepsies, clinicians, scientists, and drug developers to this conference that was basically focused on the theme that GI issues are extremely common in a lot of different neurodevelopmental disorders, and they can sometimes be one of the top issues for quality of life, and that we need to be better at, number one, detecting these early, because it's sometimes hard to tell, especially in people who maybe have limited verbal language, and that may not be the first thing that is detected. So we are following up on this conference that we had and writing up publications in concert with our experts, such as Dr. Billy Bennett, to have some traction in the medical and scientific community. But we also have a workforce of, or a task force of people who focus on GI in neurodevelopmental disorders, working on how to measure these symptoms. So developing tools that are really more appropriate and possibly hands-off to really try to analyze these GI issues early, and so we can better detect and treat them. Okay, so I realize it must look funny when I stop and I'm looking at the comments, but that's what I'm doing if I ever stop talking. So um, I would love to wrap up with the comment that we are redoing a lot of the scientific part of the PMSF.org website, and we are building out a scientific roadmap so that you all can see our vision and each phase of research and where our current initiatives fall. So we're hoping that this can be kind of an interactive map where you can click on individual initiatives and learn more about them and see, where this goes in the whole stage from, managing things right now all the way to future drug development. And we really just want this to be very readily available and communicate more of what we're doing right as we're doing it so that you all can see that and see that there's a vision for the future and a vision for right now. And I think that we've learned from our conference sessions this year that you all appreciate getting frequent updates. So something that I'm planning to do is have possibly a monthly webinar that is, about this length or shorter, maybe 25 minutes, really informal, me chatting with, somebody who's working on an initiative with us. So for instance, if I did the Young Investigator Award, I might interview Dr. Rahman and just bring you all an update about one of our initiatives every month because there might be a little bit of a void without having these scientific conference sessions. So I think there's enough going on that we could do that relatively frequently. And of course, as we flesh out the year, new things will come up, new initiatives will arise, and we're always in a bit of flux. So if you ever have, advice or things that you most want focused on, please don't shy away from emailing me or emailing us, either info@pmsf.org or at kate@pmsf.org. We're always listening to what is highest priority for you. So I think that's it for today. I'm just looking again if there's any questions. And I will make sure that I patrol these and answer them after the fact as well, because this will live on our page. We have some comments about the grants program. Amazing. All right, I think that's it. I would love to thank you all for joining. Thank you all for your generosity, especially in the context of Giving Tuesday, and hope that we can do this more often and chat in real time in some of the upcoming webinars. So cheers to you. Thank you. And I hope everybody has a fantastic holiday season.
Our mission at Jaguar is to accelerate breakthroughs in gene therapy for patients with severe genetic diseases.
With gene therapy, we can give the opportunity at a better life. That's what makes Jaguar special.